Welcome back to Mind Paradox. Have you ever felt like someone was hiding their true intentions behind a mask? In a world where deception lurks around every corner, understanding the hidden motives of those around us is more crucial than ever. Today, we're diving deep into the shadows with 7 Machiavellian tests that will empower you to uncover the real motives of anyone, no matter how well they disguise them. Get ready to sharpen your instincts and reveal the truth. Let's get started. This video is about 7 Machiavellian tests, psychological mirrors, subtle disruptions, calm, quiet ways to observe someone's character unfold without them realizing it. Because in the end, if someone is hiding their true intentions, the most powerful thing you can do is let them expose themselves. Power doesn't change people, it reveals them. Machiavelli understood this long before modern psychology confirmed it. He watched dukes, generals, and politicians rise from nothing and become monsters the moment they were no longer desperate to please. He learned that when someone is hungry, humble, uncertain, they will seem kind because they have to. But give them influence, status, control, opportunity, and their true character steps forward fully formed. That's your first test. Give someone power just a little and watch what they do with it. Do they stay kind when they don't have to be? Do they stay fair when no one's watching? Or do they tighten their grip, change the tone, rewrite the script? It doesn't have to be dramatic. In fact, it's better if it's not. Power is not always a kingdom. Sometimes it's control over a shared project, access to private information, a moment when they could cut ahead in line and no one would stop them. Sometimes it's as small as letting them speak uninterrupted and seeing whether they ever ask for your voice in return. Machiavelli once wrote, "It is much more secure to be feared than to be loved." But what he left unsaid was this: the man who needs to be feared once he has power was never worthy of it to begin with. You see it everywhere. The colleague who gets promoted and starts ignoring your ideas. The friend who suddenly feels they've outgrown you. The partner who shifts once they feel you love them more, and you wonder, were they always this way, or did something change them? Nothing changed them. You just passed the test. Power removes the need for pretense. It unties the mask from behind the head and lets it fall gently without conflict. And what you see beneath is always the truth. But here's the secret. You don't have to wait for life to hand them power. You can offer it deliberately. Just enough space, just enough influence, just enough rope. Then watch. Because the ones who become cruel when they're comfortable were never kind when they were struggling. They were strategic. And now that the mask is no longer required, their real intentions write themselves across their face. So, give them power, not to lift them, not to flatter them. Give them power to reveal them. Some people don't explode when you betray them. They explode when you deny them something trivial, a small favor, a delayed reply, a no instead of a sure. And suddenly, their entire demeanor shifts. The warmth fades, the tone cools, the mask slips. This is your second test. Deny them something small and see what rises. Most people are polite when the tide flows in their favor, when you're helpful, when you're compliant, when you give. But try withholding something minor, something they aren't entitled to, but expect anyway. And you'll learn more about them in a moment than you did in years of conversation. Why does this work? Because the illusion of control is what keeps many manipulative personalities functioning. The moment you break their rhythm, you expose their inner entitlement. And nothing threatens entitlement like boundaries. Carl Jung believed that every person has a shadow, the part of us that contains our hidden drives, our unacknowledged rage, our selfishness disguised as care. When someone reacts with disproportionate anger to a small no, you're not seeing their surface. You're seeing their shadow. Not because you attack them, but because you refuse to play your assigned role. They might not scream. They might just withdraw affection. They might turn cold or sarcastic. They might say, "Wow, that's unexpected." Or, "I didn't think you'd be like that." These are not neutral statements. They're pressure. They're the beginning of emotional leverage. They're attempts to reassert dominance through guilt. But here's what matters. Healthy people handle disappointment with grace. Manipulative people treat small refusals as betrayal. Machiavelli observed this in courts all the time. The nobleman who smiled when granted a favor and turned venomous when delayed. The ally who praised you when useful and smeared you when denied access. He understood that power games are not about grand betrayals. They're about how people behave. When you stop giving them what they think they deserve. So deny them something gently, calmly, with no hostility. And then watch, not with fear, but with clarity. Because it's not your "no" that's dangerous. It's the truth it reveals in their reaction. Control doesn't always look like shouting or domination. Sometimes it looks like urgency, like someone needing an answer now. Like a message followed by 3 more when you don't reply. Like a friend who says, "Why are you ignoring me?" when you were simply breathing. This is your 3rd test. Pause. Delay your answer. Interrupt the rhythm. And then watch who can sit with uncertainty and who cannot. In a world trained by instant replies, read receipts, and rapid validation, silence feels like punishment to the insecure. But to the Machiavellian mind, silence is not absence. It is data. And Machiavelli knew something most don't. That how people react to your silence says far more than anything they say with words. When you delay your response intentionally, calmly, with no ill intent, you create a gap. And in that gap, the truth leaks out. Does the person wait patiently, respecting your time, your autonomy? Or do they try to reclaim control by accusing you, guilt-tripping you, or worse, disappearing just to make you chase them? There's a term in psychology, intermittent reinforcement. It means behavior becomes more obsessive when rewards are unpredictable. Narcissistic and manipulative personalities know this intuitively. That's why they often go silent, not because they need space, but because they want you to spiral. But this test flips the dynamic. When you go silent, not as a weapon, but as a mirror, you force them to face their own lack of control. And for those who crave dominance over your emotional state, this is unbearable. Machiavelli once wrote, "The promise given was a necessity of the past. The word broken is a necessity of the present." He didn't mean to be cruel. He meant to be observant. People will often say what they need to say until silence threatens their script. That's when the performance ends and the real intent begins. So try it. Pause before answering. Let them exist without your confirmation. Let the space breathe and see what fills it. Because the ones who panic when they lose control of your time were never trying to connect with you. They were trying to own the story. Loyalty isn't tested in isolation, it's tested in competition. This is the 4th test. Introduce a 3rd person and watch the shift. It doesn't have to be someone better, just someone new. Someone who enters the dynamic with fresh energy, a different kind of presence. And suddenly, the person you thought you understood starts behaving differently. They laugh louder, speak faster, touch less or more. They subtly correct your stories, interrupt, or ignore. You're no longer their only audience, and that changes everything. Machiavelli watched this happen constantly in court. One moment, a duke flatters the prince. The next, a foreign envoy arrives with gold and promises, and the duke switches allegiance without blinking. Why? Because the appearance of a new opportunity reveals how transactional the original bond really was. The third person doesn't corrupt the relationship, they expose it. In psychology, this is called triangulation, a term used to describe the manipulation of dynamics when a third party enters a dyad. But this test doesn't require manipulation. It only requires observation. If someone begins to compete with you when another person arrives, subtly dismissing you, diminishing your role, drawing attention to themselves, it tells you everything. They weren't in a relationship with you. They were in a relationship with your utility. They needed to feel central, needed to be admired. And the moment someone else offered that mirror more clearly, they turned toward it. Even worse, if they try to pit the third person against you or play the two of you off each other, that's not connection. That's a power game. Nur wrote, "Whoever fights monsters should see to it that in the process he does not become a monster." But when someone changes in the presence of competition, they were already becoming one. You just hadn't seen the stage lights turn on. This test is subtle. No accusations, no drama. You simply let the third energy enter the room and then watch. Do they anchor closer to you or drift toward the new? Because the ones who pivot at the first sign of better options were never standing with you. They were standing with opportunity. We all play roles. The listener, the comforter, the follower, the quiet one, the reliable one. Sometimes it's spoken, sometimes it's silent. But once the roles are set, the dynamic becomes predictable, stable, safe. But what happens when you change the script? This is your fifth test. Reverse the roles without warning. If you're usually the listener, start talking more. If you're the one who always checks in, stop checking in. If you're the peacemaker, let silence linger and then observe, because the role you're expected to play is the one that benefits the most. Machiavelli understood that power lies in pattern recognition, and that disruption, true, unexpected disruption, is the only thing that reveals genuine character. When you reverse the role, you're not being selfish. You're pressing against the unspoken contract. And people who love the role more than they loved you will not handle that well. They'll say, "You've changed." They'll pull back, get cold, maybe even try to reassert your old position through guilt or passive aggression. But what they're really saying is, "I don't like the version of you I can't control." Carl Jung warned us that the persona is not only what we show others, it's also what they need us to be in order to feel safe. And when you shed that skin, you threaten not just their view of you, but their view of themselves. There's a strange moment in this test, a quiet, painful one, when you realize someone doesn't like you more when you grow. They like you less because your growth breaks the dynamic that kept them comfortable. But here's the revelation. If the connection doesn't survive your evolution, it was never connection. It was containment. So reverse the roles softly, unexpectedly, with no drama, and see who stays. Because anyone who only values the version of you that bends will never respect the version of you that stands. There's a moment in every connection, quiet, fragile, irreversible, when you hand someone a piece of your truth. Not the polished version, not the anecdote dressed for sympathy, but the raw core. Your fear, your shame, your guilt, your wound. And in that moment, the world pauses, because this is no longer a performance. This is vulnerability by design. And the question is no longer, do they like you? Is what will they do with what they now know? This is the sixth test, the most dangerous one. offer a truth and see what they weaponize. Machiavelli is rarely remembered for vulnerability, but he understood its gravity. To reveal your weakness is not surrender. It's the sharpest way to understand a person's moral compass. You hand them a mirror, and then you watch, not what they say, but what they do. Some will lean in, others will retreat. But the ones you need to watch closely are the ones who store it quietly, strategically for later. For when conflict arises and words become knives, you will recognize them when your truth, once sacred, returns to you twisted, repeated in another voice, distorted to control or humiliate. Carl Jung once said, "Knowing your own darkness is the best method for dealing with the darknesses of other people. But knowing it isn't enough. You must also observe how others respond to it. Because your honesty isn't always met with care. Sometimes it's met with calculation. There is a special kind of cruelty in someone who smiles as they collect your soul scars just to one day use them as leverage. And yet this test is necessary not to isolate you, but to protect you. Not everyone deserves the truth of who you are. But the only way to find out is to give just enough and watch who protects it and who twists it. Because in the end, trust isn't a feeling, it's a pattern. And those who use your vulnerability against you were never listening to love you. They were listening to arm themselves. So offer a piece of truth, one you can afford to lose. Not to earn validation, but to study character. Because those who honor it may be rare, but the ones who weaponize it were always building their power on your silence. The final test is the hardest, because it asks you to do nothing. No confrontation, no message, no performance of boundaries, just silence, just absence. You disappear not to manipulate, but to observe, not to punish, but to reveal. And what happens next tells you everything, because absence is not neutral. It is a mirror that strips away performance. In your silence, the masks fall. The ones who depended on your presence for validation, control, or attention, they shift. Some grow cold, some grow loud. Some try to rewrite your story in your absence, feeding others with twisted versions of why you're gone. Others say nothing, but watch closely, carefully, as if waiting for a cue they no longer control. Machiavelli understood this deeply. He wrote that silence in the right hands is not retreat. It is precision, a scalpel for power. Because when you remove your energy from a room, from a dynamic, from a person, you create a vacuum. And what rushes to fill that space is the truth. Carl Jung believed that withdrawal wasn't escape. It was individuation, a sacred return to the self after the chaos of personas. When you disappear, even briefly, you see who only liked the version of you they could access. You see who needed your presence to feel valuable. And more importantly, you see who doesn't notice at all. And then comes the moment of return. You come back quietly. No explanation. No apology. You re-enter the room, the message, threat, the relationship, and you watch. Do they greet you with stillness or punishment? Do they act as if nothing happened, clinging to control? Or do they reflect, ask, reconnect with sincerity? Their response is the final reveal because it shows whether your presence was appreciated, tolerated, or merely consumed. Some will pretend you never left. Some will greet you with passive-aggressive silence. Some will be angry that you had the audacity to step back at all. And then some will ask where you went and mean it, not out of neediness, but out of care. They'll say, "I noticed, and I missed you." And in that line lives the difference between power and partnership. Absence isn't a game. It's a ritual. It's the furnace in which illusion melts. And when you return in silence, The truth you've been trying to uncover doesn't need to be asked. It stands there, unspoken, undeniable. Because in the end, power doesn't always require confrontation. Sometimes it just requires distance and the courage to wait in the quiet for what reveals itself. And the one who can disappear without losing themselves is the one no one can ever truly control. So now you know. You saw it in the silence, in the turning away, in the smirk when you opened your heart. You watched the mask slip, not because you tore it off, but because you stood still long enough for it to fall on its own. They failed the test, not because you trapped them, but because they revealed themselves when no one was watching. And now the question circles in your mind, like smoke. What do I do with this truth? But here's the deeper secret, the one Machiavelli understood, the one Jung hinted at, the one most never learn in time. You don't do anything. You don't correct them. You don't confront them. You don't try to fix, reform, or plead your value. The purpose of seeing clearly is not vengeance. It is liberation. You didn't test them to win. You tested them to wake up. And now that you're awake, you can stop participating in your own betrayal. Jung once wrote, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul." But that's not your burden. You are not here to carry the weight of someone else's denial, to explain the boundary they refuse to see, or to soften the blade of your clarity just so someone else can stay comfortable. The tests were never about them. They were about you, about peeling back the illusions quietly, calmly, until all that remained was truth. Not the kind that screams, but the kind that whispers, "You've seen enough. Now move differently." So no, you don't need to make a scene. You don't need to teach them a lesson. You don't even need to announce your absence. Because the moment you begin living from clarity instead of hope, the performance ends. You stop begging for attention. You stop chasing ghosts. You stop confusing silence with safety and charm with character. And in that stillness, something miraculous happens. The right people start revealing themselves too. Not through words, but through the way they protect your peace, even in your absence. This was never about exposing them. It was always about freeing you. So the next time someone fails the test, don't argue, don't explain. Just remember what you saw and walk away with your soul intact. Because once you've seen the truth, the illusion can never own you again.